Hello everybody, my name is Danny, and today, let's talk about the gender equality stuff, because it's kind of weird for me, because of the fact that just observing and listening to all these different viewpoints and all these different standpoints, and you listen to different debates and everything else like that, and arguments and everything, it gets almost confusing and overwhelming sometimes, because on the one hand, there's a lot of people that I've watched or listened to that make some really good points, but then once they start to break it down and analyze it, it obviously is from their opinion and is from their viewpoint. But I have an issue with it because the fact it becomes so. I guess it would be sexist. It becomes so like aggressively, negatively pessimistic and dark on like why it means that women are just this or women are just that or men are just this or men are just that or men are just pieces of shit and women are just pieces of shit and men are just arrogant and women are just arrogant. Da 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 da. They're just all so shallow. It's like it's so. It's overwhelming, I guess, is the number one thing. It's exhausting because it's like, one, you made good points before you started getting on your spiel, and now that you're on your spiel, I disagree with everything because it's just like this is bullshit. Like you're doing the typical American thing of going so aggressively to one extreme just because you didn't like one thing, or just because you don't like whatever this is and what you've observed, and then vice versa. Like the U.S. is full of what is called reactionary people because they don't think, they just do. They don't think, they just react. So the moment they dislike something, they react without thinking. They just instantly pounce on it. So as a result, the US is a nation of people that are of extremes, and exclusively extremes. They're either so far one way or so far the other. So that's why if you look at the US's history of like presidents and stuff like that and voting, it's always back, forth, back, forth, back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. Because of the fact that everybody hates one, then they hate the other, then they hate that one, then they hate this one, then they hate that one, then they hate this one. This one did tons of horrible shit. This one did tons of horrible shit. This one fucked us over. No, that one fucked us over. No, this party fucked us over. No, that one. It just goes because everybody's a fucking 5-year-old and don't have any fucking brain power to be used, apparently. It's ridiculous. And so it's the same, obviously, with like relationships and stuff like that. And gender equality debates and stuff. I myself, by definition, the original, actual, only real definition of feminism is a feminist. I am a feminist, and I am actually very happy about it. I have no problems with it. Like, people always are like, feminism's such bullshit, or third wave feminism. I have a problem with even people calling it third wave feminism, because third wave feminism, if you look it up in the dictionary, is literally just the current era of feminism. The last one would be called second, and the first one would be called first wave. So, like, early 1900s, women's suffrage? How do you say that word? I don't know. Anyway, and all of that stuff, that was first wave. Second wave, obviously, was around the same time as the civil rights movement of the 60s. That was dominated by racial stuff, but obviously they had some gender stuff in there, too. So women got some rights, especially a little bit later in, like, the 70s. Somewhere Thomas Sowell was like, and that's when things went wrong. Different story. Anyway, listen, the point is, right, that's second wave. Now there's third wave. Because the third wave incoming incoming and outbound of feminism, it just means that, hey, it's re-entered the chat, as I guess my age group would say, who dwells on the internet too much. That's all it is. And so when we say third wave feminism, it's strictly derogatory now, because they're talking about the minority of people who claim to be feminists who are so far from being feminist. They're matriarchal, as in they are what's called misandrists, female chauvinists. They're sexist towards men, and they're chauvinistic towards men. And when you say a man is misogynistic, the female form of misogyny is misandry. So they'd be misandristic. Congratulations. And that's what they are. They're misandrists. They are sexists. They are about installing a matriarchy. A female dictated, controlled, dominated society where men are the lower class. Notice how I said this country is nothing but a people of extremes? Case Case in point, by the way, again, which I didn't intend to use that for this, but then again, I just realized actually it's a perfect case in point yet again. And that's who they're referring to. They're referring to these assholes charading and pretending that they're feminists when they know damn well they don't represent feminism at all. Feminism, by its original and only true definition, is quite simply equality of genders. So, equal rights, specifically, for women and men. They have the same rights. That's literally all it is. Congratulations! Now, if you want more than that, or you think it's more than that, you just proved to yourself and the world you're not a feminist. Fat clap. Good for you. You're an idiot. That is an opinion, but I want to claim it's a fact, so there. How's that for maturity? So because I'm an actual feminist, I do have a problem with that, because I don't like the idea of giving them that much fucking credit for being assholes. Like, just because they're the loudest wheels, you know how the squeaky wheel gets the grease? That's what all SJWs are too. They're just a bunch of fucking loudmouths, bitching people who are just desperate for attention to get their way. That's it. So what do? They take that mentality and they fucking put it on steroids and meth. And they just go. They just genetically modify it to be this mutant speed demon with never-ending power and stamina. To just go pile drive through everything to get their way. They take that, that's what they do with the squeaky wheel against the grease mentality. That's what they have. That's why that's all you ever see and hear. Of course, the media and the government is hugely a big part of that, because they're giving them the platform and the voices, and they're giving into them, which likely also points, once again, wink and wink and nudge nudge, to their agenda globally. It's something they actually want to promote and want to have happen. Go figure. Different story. But yeah, that's who you're hearing, and that's who you're derogatorily calling third-wave feminists. So to throw all feminism or third-wave feminism under the bus is not, to me, is incorrect and not right, and it's actually proving a lack of intelligence and definitely willful stupidity. So I'm not too keen on that, because that causes third-wave feminism getting cast over there, and you only hearing about that, of course, quickly causes you and tons of other people, whether you realize it or not, consciously or subconsciously, to start also derogatorily using feminist. So then guess what happens? Now, anybody who claims to be a feminist, even myself, is suddenly now this extremist, you know, far-left, Nazi-like piece of shit. Irony of saying far-left Nazi-like. Because they're so far-left, they're right. That's why I call them SIFs, self-ignorant fascists, because that's what they are. They're so far-left, they're right. I do often kind of think off and on, whether consciously or subconsciously, about equality in different aspects, especially considering it sounds like pretty soon in the local area, there's a guy and his brother that are going to start a little bit of a unofficial league, basketball league, out at a park that I frequent for basketball. And he invited us to become a part of it, and I would love to become a part of it, obviously. It's funny because I actually had thought about that quite a bit, especially once I get an income going and I officially get myself established and maybe even start to have a really good income and have a good amount of savings and establish myself in other aspects. Then, you know, I could try to organize a basketball league too if I wanted to, and I've thought about that. One aspect I've thought about these things is if it gets big enough and popular enough and supported enough by the local community, right? Then likely it is, inevitably at some point, there's probably going to be a call to bring co-op in or something like that. And I've always been 1 foot on one side of the fence and 1 foot on the other side of the fence with co-op, because I would love nothing more than to see women start to play basketball way more frequently and have a passion for it too, and keep trying to get better and better, and then want to have fun competing, even if it is with guys. But that's 1 foot on that side of the fence. But then on the other side, I understand that there is factual dangers because of biology at play. Women are biologically far more physically fragile than men are. That's just a biological fact of life. And on top of that, of course, biologically men are far stronger than women. physically. Again, it's just a biological fact, and they're usually, not always, they're usually far more athletic as well. So as a result, women are set up in co-op leagues, especially contact sports like basketball, to get gravely injured by the men they play with, even their own teammates. I even have personal experience with injuring women when playing basketball against them. And it's obviously never ever intended. It's just that you can make incidental contact is what it's called. It's called incidental contact because that's just part of the sport as a contact sport. You're gonna have contact no matter what sometimes. And when they've ever met my arm, especially my the outside of my elbow or my shoulder, I've without fail drawn blood on their foreheads because I pop open their forehead, and so I draw blood, and probably give them bad concussions because of it. But the thing is I'm not colliding with them, and they're not just colliding with me. It's literally we're colliding with each other. In my case, both times, it is actually all three times. It is a case of we're hustling for the ball. We're giving just as much heart and effort to get to the ball first, to save it and grab it and get a basket in. And because we're going for it like this, eventually a chevron meets. And so my shoulder and their forehead, boom, or my outside of my elbow and there's meat or whatever. And it's bad. And then you look at the history of, in the US, let alone probably elsewhere, with contact sports especially, but sports in general, right around the time that co-op officially died completely. It just stopped existing on any level, including recreationally, in contact sports specifically, in the US, was right around Y2K. And the main reason why was because of that exact reason. That's exactly one of the main reasons, if not the main reason why, is because they had way too many women getting injured. And not only way more frequently they got injured, but way more severely than the men usually got in the co-ops. And almost exclusively it was from the men themselves in some capacity. And so that's why I have my foot on that opposite side of the fence too, with the idea of introducing co-op. I love the idea of it. It would be a lot of fun. But then at the same time, there's a lot of fucking risks, and especially in the modern legal environment, you'd be royally fucked. Because if they decide to have a typical modern younger person mentality, the first instinct for them is, I'm suing for damages because I can't afford this or whatever else. Or I feel slighted. But see, then what it will do is it will quickly enter into another problem. Especially if they have that modern mentality, then more likely than not, they're also thinking, well, they're a man and I'm a woman, so I have advantage. Whether they consciously think about it that way or not, and I'm sure it's conscious for most of them, they know damn well they have a legal advantage just because of their gender. That's literally just because of the chromosomes they have. That's it. Like, they know that. That mentality enters in with another idea of, well, I'm a woman, and if there's, and without ever directly saying it, it's like they should know better than to go just as hard as they do with the men. Because that's, in other words, like, no shit. And it's like, it's their way of indirectly saying they acknowledge biological differences in this fact, and that's why they got smacked way harder than than the guy took the brunt. She takes the brunt because she's a woman versus the guy. And so the biology means that apparently it's discrimination of some sort. And it just runs into deeper and deeper issues with that. And then that mentality carries into that, which then carries into also the problem of the debate of like, okay, if you didn't want me to give my all because of the biological reality that I could have gravely injured you, and you didn't want to get injured, now you did because I gave you my all, and I treated you as an equal, by the way, as you say you want. Now that you're injured, now you want to bitch and say, well, why didn't you lighten up? But if I made the choice to play not 100% and clearly play like half-assed, then it would be patronizing you. And that's wrong too. And you know what that's called? It's called entrapment. Because it's an impossible position you put the guy in. They can't do anything. Literally can't. Because no matter which choice they make, it's wrong, apparently. So which one do you fucking want? Do you want to be injured? To have, you know, basically risk being badly injured because I'm treating you as an equal and playing you as an equal? Or do you want me to half-ass it and what would basically kind of be, in a way, patronizing you because you're physically weaker and more fragile because of biology? Which one do you want? Do you want patronization or do you want an injury? You know what I mean? And so it's like, that's why, all the more reason why I have one foot on one side of the fence against co-op and one side on the other side where I'm all for it. I would love nothing more than to see it. I would love nothing more than to be involved in co-op. I would absolutely love it. But at the same time, you have to acknowledge the biological difference. That's a blatant fact. You have to. Because, yeah. And then at that point, you also have to acknowledge the reality of a lot of mentalities, the legal system, how it's set up with this kind of stuff and everything like that. And especially if you start your own league, you and the league and or the person that injured them are all likely going to be sued. You may face a lawsuit. And so at that point, if you're semi-organized, if there's a registry for, you know, amateur novice leagues in the US, I have no idea if there is, or in states, I have no idea. But let's pretend there is, or assume there is one, then you're official without being registered as one. Because you're not for profit, you're not trying to become big, you're just still staying in your local area, but you get big enough and popular enough in that area. You know, maybe you even have a YouTube channel now where you stream the games or something, right? Like, at that point, now you have the people asking for a co-op. You would have to bring up this fact and be like, if we're going to allow ourselves to now add a co-op set of teams to our league, or sub-league, right? Add the sub-league of co-op play. Okay. We're going to make the women sign waivers. Legal waivers that say they waive any right to sue anybody unless it is deemed by a majority of people that it seemed to be intended. So, malicious. But then they despise and hate that and then get bitter about that too. But it's like, you have to understand there's a biological difference, and it's inevitable, unfortunately, that yes, somebody is probably going to fucking sue everybody. And that completely ruins the entire league. Instantly. They have to fold, because nobody can fucking afford that. You can't do anything. Like, what are you supposed to fucking do? It's an important question that people have to think about and consider. And so in that aspect, you'd have to be like, well, if we do it, there's going to be a waiver that only the women will have to sign, because it's only the women that are going to have the audacity to do that, because biological difference is out of the favor of the girl. Today I learned apparently Streamlabs, OBS, does not fucking have an ability to refocus your webcam while you're recording, unlike actual OBS. That's fucking bullshit and really fucking infuriating. It puts me in a weird position because obviously everybody's an extreme, right? And they very much follow the lead, follow the crowd. So whatever crowd they feel like they need to identify as to fit in with their supposed social groups, they're going to follow. And so that means that, yeah, if it's in a more SJW aspect, then they're going to be anti-me because of what I just said. But then at the same time, if you're on the other side of the fence, you're still going to be anti-me because it's too left-wing, apparently. So I'm in a possible position where I can't win, basically. But I'm in the central position where I think it makes the most sense. You're looking at every aspect of it being like, this is the honest reality of it. So I don't know if this helps anybody better understand somebody in a more centralized perspective with it, where you're not necessarily on one side or the other. Maybe you're even on both a bit, because both have valid points, and they do. But yeah, you know, it's like another thing actually with basketball, this is really specific. There is actually another biological difference that it really impacts basketball, besides the three that I mentioned. And that is, quite literally, as dumb and stupid as it sounds, men's and women's elbows are biologically built differently. They literally function differently. They're even jointed differently, at a different angle. So our men's elbows work completely different than women's do. And that's why, of course, a lot of times people point it out by saying, look at how women find it most comfortable to carry things versus men. and it's truth. And if you watch women and their shooting forms in basketball, even the most professional and legendary, WNBA players, as an example, versus just about any level of consistent NBA player, so a player that gets consistent time on a roster, consistently season to season, you'll notice there's a massive difference in shooting form. The women are almost uniform. They almost all have just about the exact same shooting form, especially from outside. The men, on the other hand, are, in comparison, they're intensely variable. You never know what kind of form you're going to see. It's all over the place. And that's from shot base to top. The release of women is very specific, so is their shot base. In fact, their shot base, I would argue, is more specific, because men typically, what they do is their feet will start directly underneath them and end by landing again on a shot slightly to quite a bit in front of their bodies. Women, on the other hand, start just slightly behind or just underneath their bodies, it's usually slightly behind their bodies, and end with their bodies way forward like this and their legs way back. So their shooting form is kind of like this from distance, and men's are just whatever they are, because they're variable, unlike women's. And I know a big part of that is going to be because of the joint differences and the elbows. And therefore, on top of that, the strength difference between men and women physically. Those two things are going to definitely dictate, from the further out they shoot, what they have to do with their bodies in order to get that distance covered compared to the guys. Guys don't have to necessarily do as much. Women clearly do. They have to use their entire bodies. Even the best of the best apparently seem to always have to use their entire bodies to shoot from distance, whereas men usually don't. The only time that men and women shoot the same is when a boy, usually a young boy, but even teenagers sometimes and adults, when they first start to learn how to play basketball, first basically pick up a basketball, take it seriously enough to try to hit shots from further and further out, the further out they go, the more they'll start to be almost identical to a woman. And that makes perfect sense because, again, they've never really touched a basketball and they've never really taken it seriously to shoot any hoops, especially from distance. So as a result, your body is your brain, your body, right? They're all in sync, trying to understand to figure out the mechanics of what it's going to take to get you that far and get you to hit that shot, and also then eventually become more accurate. And as you're slowly fine-tuning that, unlike men, they will keep changing their shooting form. Their shooting form will slowly shift if they autopilot enough, like you're supposed to do in sports, and then eventually they find it, and they start hitting consistently from different spots. That's because their form keeps shifting depending on how much progress they've made learning, because physically they're stronger and their joints act different. It's just a fact. It's funny because it goes into like even transgender stuff, because you have to consider that too. So of course I'm going to touch on that. Anyway, so like, it really gets my lobster going.